Well, our final session of the day, it's been a tremendous day, is on the importance of taking care of our hearing and the medical side effects of hearing loss. We are joined today by Chelsea Walters.
Chelsea is speaking second.
She'll speak second. Okay, so I'll introduce Gina first. Gina Muehlberg earned her master's degree in audiology from the University of Colorado. She did her undergraduate work at the University of Maryland, where a passionate professor influenced her decision to become an audiologist. She holds her clinical certification from American Speech, Language, and Hearing Association, and she spent most of her professional career working in ENT practices with emphasis on hearing aid fitting. So I'll introduce Chelsea after Gina's finished.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here right now. I know it's been a long morning and it's gorgeous out and everybody wants to get back outside. So hopefully I'll give you some information today that might be new to you. My colleague Samantha Warren put this talk together. Unfortunately, she was unable to be here today, but this is her work I'll be presenting. And it is based on literature, and if anyone wants the references, they can email her. We have her card at the booth, but it's samantha.warren@Boulder Valley Hearing Associates. Or wait, it's Boulder Valley ENT, isn't it? Yeah, because we're associated with doctors. So we work in the hospital, and so our website is bouldervalleyent.com. We have a few locations, and anyhow, we'll get to the talk now. So what are the medical effects of hearing loss? What and why? Why do we lose our hearing? Does treatment matter? How does the body affect hearing, and how does hearing affect your body? So why does hearing degrade with age? Well, part of it is the anatomy of the ear. So our cochlea, which is our sensory organ, is a little snail shape. You might know that. And the different frequencies of hearing are little hair cells around the cochlea. And some of those hair cells are a little more peripheral to our ear and get damaged a little more easily. And that's why we have, most of us, high-frequency hearing loss as we age. And that's why noise exposure can influence and make your hearing worse. So noise exposure in the form of power tools and weapons, loud rock and roll, lawn mowers, all sorts of different loud noises in our world will hurt our hearing. So it's very important to use ear protection if you anticipate being exposed to that. And sometimes you don't anticipate it, so we actually have some earplugs at our booth, so if you want to pick up any. I always think about the time, and I am digressing from her talk, I'll admit that, but I think of the time when I admit I love beautiful music, not necessarily loud music, but music. But I hate it when there's that guy behind me who's whistling because they did such a great job, and my ears, my sensory organ is being affected by it. So, there's all sorts of noise pollution in our world, and we can protect our hearing a little better. Check my notes on this. So let's go on to the next slide. Definition of hearing loss. What is normal? People come in and they say to us when we check their hearing, they'll say, well, is it normal for my age? Well, actually, our graphs, when you get a hearing test, there's a graph of frequency and loudness. And we don't have norms per se for people of every age. We know that as we age, most of us lose a little hearing loss, but it really varies. It's not everyone. I've tested a few people last week in their mid-70s, and they had, for the most part, normal range hearing. But it wasn't normal for their age. It was literally normal. So you really don't know what your hearing is, and the reason we say normal is everyone should be able to hear comfortably. We don't, just because you might be 75 years old, that doesn't mean that, well, that's okay because I'm 75. It's okay if I don't hear. No, it's not okay. We all want to hear. We want to be involved in life. We don't want to be separated, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's see. Okay, I already explained that. Why does hearing degrade with age? So I talked a little bit about the anatomy, but that shows you the cochlea in the inner ear, okay? But the cochlea is only part of our sensory neural hearing, right? So cochlea is sensory, but then sound goes along the nerve to the brain. That's what I'm going to talk a little bit more about. Okay, so here's a slide. It just shows you a little piano. So it shows you the pitches that we test in hearing and about where we hear on the piano, mid-range. See if there was anything else she wrote that might be of interest. So I think it goes with this slide with high-frequency hearing loss. Let me just jump ahead. Okay. So here's the graph that we fill in when you come in for a hearing test. And I don't know, can people see that? Is it big enough? I can't tell. You have to have those glasses or get that implant that our last speaker talked about. But what it's showing is relatively normal range hearing from 250 hertz to 2000 hertz, and then there's a precipitous or sharp drop between 2000 and 3000 hertz. And what that means is that we seem to hear pretty good most of the time, but we have some high frequency consonant sounds that we're missing. So let's see. Oh, that's a little bigger. There we go. Could see it now. The X's, by the way, is showing your hearing thresholds for your left ear, and the circles are right ear. Okay? Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about the cost of hearing loss and untreated hearing loss. So apparently, and this again has been studied, so there are a number of studies that have supported this over time, that they've noticed a correlation of 30 to 40% faster decline in cognitive abilities with untreated hearing loss. As well, these studies have shown that people with untreated hearing loss have a 3 to 5 times more likelihood to have a fall. Now, why would that be? Well, we talk about sensory overload. And if you are walking, you're taking a walk with your friend along the Boulder Creek path, and you're having a little trouble hearing your friend. Maybe, for whatever reason, you just have a little high frequency hearing loss, and you thought, well, I don't need hearing aids, I get along. But you're really focusing on hearing your friend, so you're not focusing on other things in your environment. Maybe you're not focusing on where you're walking because you're going like this, and you're more likely to have a fall. Well, the next one is pretty intuitive, right? You're 60% more likely to have depression. You're isolated. You're not hearing well. Of course you're going to feel depressed. You're sitting with a group of family and friends, and I don't know, half of them, all of them are laughing at the joke that you didn't get. And you can't ask people, oh, can you repeat that joke again? It doesn't feel all that comfortable, right? So very slowly over time, we really start to withdraw. We withdraw from our families, our friends. We say, oh, it's just easier. It's not important. I didn't miss anything important. And it's sad, really. You want to engage. I'm going to, I don't know, maybe give me if I'm not looking at time, give me that buzzer warning, but because I do tend to go off on tangents. But a number of years ago, I was at a convention with one of our hearing aid manufacturers, and they usually have a keynote speaker who has nothing to do with hearing. But it was very interesting. Has anyone heard of the book, The Blue Zones? Anyone? Okay, few of you. I thought it was fascinating. So I'll tell you a little bit about it, but it ties into the depression. But it talked about, they identified, 5, 6 areas of the world where they called them blue zones, where people lived longer. And not just lived longer, but lived fuller, active, healthier lives. And they looked at the factors associated with that. In Japan, people were eating more fish in this one village. In Greece, they were so active. These were, I don't know if they were sheep herders, goat herders, I don't remember, but they were walking and doing a lot of mountain climbing, and they lived vibrant, long lives. The one place in our country that was identified was in Southern California, and it was a Seventh-day Adventist community. And the striking thing there was community. Being involved in your community and having relationships with people, they found that community had longer and healthier lives. So that goes to, you don't want to withdraw from life. You'll get depressed. You will, your body, our brains are fascinating. Do we really even understand so much of what our brains do? We understand a lot. We've made a lot of strides, but I think it's fascinating. So it's so important not to withdraw, to be involved. And actually, I don't know if those of you who raised your hand, but I think that they were identifying more blue zones. I think Boulder might have been identified. I could be wrong, but I was remembering that. Community is so important. Friends, family, don't withdraw. So this is interesting. I guess they did some studies and they found that there was actual brain shrinkage, so reduction in gray matter of people who had untreated hearing loss. The brain, if it's not stimulated, the neurons and the firings and everything that goes on in brain processing doesn't happen to a large degree. So we really need to think about what we're missing out on. Okay, so this is a little more of a specific statistic that showed that it tripled your risk of falling with untreated hearing loss, increased risk of hospitalization and readmission, and the cost. Okay, so the cost was $22,000 more in healthcare costs than people without hearing loss. Okay, what is our body's effect on our ears? So I talked a little bit about untreated hearing loss, effect on our body. But this is very interesting. Did anyone know that high blood pressure is correlated with accelerated hearing loss? I don't know if I knew that. And that I did know that hearing loss is twice as common with diabetes, reduced circulation, and osteoporosis negatively impacts hearing. As well, we want to go the opposite direction. We want to be a little positive here. Better cardio fitness. You're getting your blood flowing, and that blood flow goes to the inner ear, right? Okay, so will hearing aids help? Will they reverse cognitive reorganization? Okay, and not cognitive decline. Will it prevent further degradation, improve relationships, and boost cognitive functioning? Okay, now there are a few other facts she had here. I kind of was looking at the slides and telling my own stories. Let's just see. So one thing that you might ask a little more about that high-frequency hearing loss, and what's in those frequencies that we're missing. And so there are high-frequency consonant sounds. So if I isolate these consonants, you'll see what I mean. So here's the sound. It's pretty soft. If you pair it with sit, you can get it. Or the f sound, fit, it's the it you're really hearing, okay? That's pretty silent. That's pretty soft and high frequency. So sometimes it's context, what words, what sounds it's pairing with, but those are just kind of examples. So you might not know the difference between let's have steak for dinner or where should I take for dinner? Where should I take you? Steak, take, I don't know. Just sounds, just some examples of what happens with high frequency sounds. Let's see. So I'm going to pause here and just ask, I could talk a lot, but is there anyone who has questions? Anything about what we've talked about? Not really? Okay. Yeah? Yeah, maybe wait a moment because I can't hear you. Not all the way over here.
I'm just interested in the effects of tinnitus or tinnitus on the brain. I keep hearing things about tinnitus affecting your brain, damaging your brain. Is that something that you deal with?
Well, I don't know if I could speak to a study on that particular question. So tinnitus or tinnitus has many causes. We see people with hearing loss with tinnitus and those who don't have it. So if you have tinnitus from hearing loss, all the things I talked about will be true. And sometimes it's the chicken or the egg story. Which came first? The hearing loss or tinnitus, because they happen together. So tinnitus is something that is a low-level sound that we hear, and it's believed to be derived in the auditory cortex, and that there's sounds that our brain is making that, for a number of reasons. So, but you're asking if it's damaging our brains, and I don't have specific studies that speak to that question, but I think that tinnitus is one of the more difficult and elusive problems that we treat. And if you have hearing loss, hearing aids for most people alleviate tinnitus. They may not eradicate it totally, but it alleviates it for many to the point where it's not noticeable. I've had patients who have been plagued by tinnitus say to me, you know, I don't really focus on it, and I'm doing better. It's not bothering me. So that's a brain thing, right? You're training your brain not to focus on something negative. It's like other aches and pains. The more something bothers us, the more we focus on it, and then the more it bothers us, right? So I just think that with tinnitus, it is important if you have any hearing loss to try hearing aid fitting, because sometimes people don't even realize they have hearing loss because the tinnitus bothers them so much. But I think it's a good thing to try. And then we do have maskers. There's a number of solutions for people who don't have hearing loss but are plagued by tinnitus. But the brain always seems to come back and try to, it's like a battle. You know, you use a device to try to mask or overcome the tinnitus, and it works for a while, and the brain reorganizes and says, I'm gonna get you. I mean, the brain is really tricky. So you have to continue treatment, and yeah. So.
Gina, thank you so much. That was very informative. I think we're going to turn it over to Chelsea now.
Okay, this lady just had one more question. I don't know.
Do you speak on cochlear transplants at all?
Cochlear implants, we don't do that at our clinic. I know about them. I'm happy to talk with you later, but that's not in the scope of the talk right now. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Gina. Excellent job.
Okay.
Chelsea Walters, she is co-owner of Family Hearing. And it says that she's always had heart to help people. She's a music connoisseur. She knows how sounds can set the tone for life. Chelsea takes seriously her role in helping all her clients stay connected to the sounds and the people that matter most to them. So please welcome Chelsea Walters.
And then thank you all for coming today. I really appreciate it. My name is Chelsea Walters, and I'm a board-certified hearing instrument specialist and co-owner of Family Hearing, which is the longest-serving, most awarded hearing practice in the region. I presume that most people in the audience have seen news headlines or heard stories about how hearing devices are overpriced, that you can get the same ear gear online as you can get in private practice, and that they're going to start being covered by Medicare. This provides a glimpse into the headspace of a new kind of audio consumer, one that wants quality of sound for the right price, one that wants easier access to the audio gadgets that they desire, and one that wants more options to choose from. My goal in this discussion today is to share with you how the industry as a whole and how private practices like mine are bending to meet the needs of the modern listener. So to do that, we are going to cover the profile of listeners today, understand why better hearing is important, Get to know the paths to treatments and alternatives to that classic path. Understand what listeners want today, which you might feel like you know what you want, and how to determine what the best choice is for you. So listeners today are more tech savvy. Young and old have embraced technologies like FaceTime or text messaging for communication. And in a world of instant access, modern listeners have information at their fingertips. They seek solutions for better hearing on their own and come into practice knowing what they want and what they don't. Instant access also heightens the expectation that products, services, communications around these consumer demands are met on the timelines and the terms that they desire. And not to be forgotten is how connected all of us are today. We are all often led to our choice in product or service based on reading an online review or phoning a friend who we relate to. So modern listeners have some hopes. They are looking for personal care that's flexible. They want the choices in care and technology to be easy to access. They want prices that match the value of what they're receiving. They want the most advanced technology, and they also want that technology to be intuitive and easy to use. They want technology and care that promotes physical and emotional well-being, and they don't want to take a back seat in this process. They want to actively participate in the choices that they are making towards their hearing treatment plans. Listeners today also have some fears. They worry that care is going to become depersonalized as more big tech companies get into the hearing care space. Calling a 1-800 number or watching a YouTube video is not the same as coming into a friend who can just fix it for you in 5 minutes. They also worry that big tech companies might not have the same ethics as the private practices they've been working with when it comes to the data that's being shared as these devices become more and more wireless and connected with each other. Listeners today understand intrinsically the importance of better hearing. And that's in part because there's so many different audio gadgets that you can see out in the marketplace. People are walking around with AirPods in their ears everywhere you look. And it's also because many people have experience with missing out on connections from the people who matter most to them, feeling withdrawn or isolated because you can't participate in a conversation, and loss of self-confidence for the same reasons. Also, listeners probably have had some exposure to the fact, like what Gina was talking about, hearing health is tied to overall health. So I always like to take a second to talk a little bit about what hearing loss is and what it isn't. Hearing loss doesn't mean that you can't hear. It means that you're missing out on pieces of the sound picture. Oh, sorry, that was me. It means that you're missing out on pieces of the sound picture, just like a crossword puzzle. The greater the hearing loss, the more holes in that puzzle, and the harder the puzzle becomes to solve. But the brain doesn't just sit around. In absence of sound from the ears, the brain tries to fill in the gaps. So when someone with normal hearing listens, the auditory part of the brain is distinctly engaged. But when somebody with untreated hearing loss listens, the visual and deductive reasoning centers of the brain become more engaged. So you can actually see the brain compensating for the hearing loss. Those shifts are not only changing how the brain functions, but like Gina mentioned, are also reducing brain mass. There's actual brain atrophy due to untreated hearing loss, and higher incidences of dementia when the hearing loss is left untreated. The key word in those scary facts is the word untreated. Untreated hearing loss is linked to loss of connections, cognitive decline, and a lot of other negatives, minus maybe not hearing your spouse tell you something you don't want to hear every once in a while. But research does show that better hearing makes speech easier to understand. It improves decision-making. It improves working memory. That means the ability to remember ketchup at the grocery store without having to look at a list. It means reducing isolation, and it also preserves connections. It reinvigorates those connections to the sounds and the people that matter most to you. I should have never moved to this microphone, I'm sorry. So how do people get the hearing care that they need? Traditionally, this is done by scheduling an appointment where you're going to have an evaluation, which is a hearing test and an interview. You're going to later get fit with the technology that you have selected with your provider. And then you're going to have fine-tuning appointments to make sure that those hearing devices are meeting the goals that you came in wanting to be solved. After that comes general care and maintenance appointments, because just like a car needs an oil changed or its tire rotated, your hearing aids are getting sweat on, they're getting rained on, dead skin is getting in them, and they need the same type of care and maintenance regularly to make sure they're performing optimally. That process repeats with yearly checkups, adjusting the hearing devices if the hearing loss changes or if your goals change, and then again, those regular care and maintenance appointments. Generally, those types of appointments include drive time to the office. But like I said earlier, people today are busy. People today might not drive, either by choice or because they can't. And that is not a barrier when you're working with a company that practices house calls. Family Hearing has provided house calls for decades. And in this scenario, all of your services can be delivered in the home, where the calibrated equipment and the licensed professional come to you. This provides a great benefit when fitting or fine-tuning the devices, because we're actually fitting them in the settings that you're in. We can take into account vaulted ceilings, oxygen that might always be running. I even had the opportunity to go to a pianist's house and tune 3 pianos in 3 different rooms, which was fun for her and fun for me, but something that we couldn't do in the office space itself. Also, another new tool that we have, it's actually been around for about 4 or 5 years now, but the pandemic has certainly made it a bit hotter, and that is remote care, the ability to meet virtually and get your care taken care of. Not all practices provide this service as well, so definitely check in with your provider and see if this is something that they do. In this scenario, you are going to meet your provider on a FaceTime-like application. The only difference is your hearing devices also have to connect to the meeting. This, in our opinion at Family Hearing, has provided great value for busy professionals who can't leave the office, for snowbirds, and for people who are afraid to come into the office for health reasons. We've had a lot of people not want to come into office spaces during the pandemic, and this has really given us the freedom to still help. So the question then becomes, why don't I recommend telecare for all phases of the hearing care journey, specifically not for the evaluation and for the fitting? Even though meeting your provider online offers some huge conveniences, it also misses some crucial components of a good evaluation and fitting. The first of which is a visual inspection of the ear. Often we can find earwax or anatomical anomalies that might change the loss, where we just need to remove some wax and you'll get a little bit better hearing, or we might make a different recommendation on the type of device you're getting based on how your ear is shaped. Secondly, computer speakers, headphones, earbuds do not meet audiology standards for testing. In fact, using different headphones on the same computer can yield different results. That doesn't mean that online hearing tests don't provide some value. For people who are really trying to identify, do I have a hearing loss or not, or first researching kind of the road to better hearing themselves, this can get the mind flowing about all things ear-related. There are 2 types of online hearing tests. One is quiz-based, where you're going to answer some questions about your personal health history, areas where you have challenges hearing, and family history of hearing loss. The second adds upon that listening exercises, where you will listen to speech or other sounds in conjunction with varying levels of background noise and have to answer questions about what you hear. Lastly, the fit has to be done in person if it's going to be done right. Your provider needs to ensure that it fits well in your ears, because that's the best tool in terms of reducing feedback or when your hearing aids whistle. It's also how we make sure that it meets the needs of your loss. And in the last 2 years, we want to make sure those puppies stay in when your mask comes on and off, because masks aren't going away for a little while. Additionally, measurements like real ear measurement, where we validate that the fitting is meeting your prescription, can only be done in the office just based on how that equipment is made. Moving away from different ways to access hearing care, another listener goal is reducing the cost. Hearing devices have a bad reputation for costing more than what people want to pay. But what's lesser understood is that it's not just the technology that you're paying for. At a minimum, that is going to include the technology itself and 3 appointments to fit the hearing aids, make sure they're meeting the needs of your loss, your prescription, your goals, fine-tuning appointments to adjust them, and probably an appointment to make sure you know how to use them. Are you getting them in your ears properly? Do you know how they sync to your phone? As a provider who helps people achieve success with better hearing, I know full well that it's more than the technology that makes people successful with their hearing goals. But that's my opinion. Listeners today want to form their own opinions about what it takes to meet their hearing goals. And so there are some things to consider when shopping for a hearing device or a provider. The first is the cost, obviously. The second is the technology that you're getting. What is the make, the model, the features that it boasts? What are the terms of service? Are you getting those minimum 3 appointments? Are you getting years of service included? What types of services are offered by the practice that you're working with? Do they do house calls? Do they do wax removal, real ear measurement? Not every practice is the same in terms of the types of services that they deliver. What's the warranty? Are they covered for loss? What's the return period? How long can you return them if you're not happy with the results that you're getting? And lastly, what's your general impression? Research shows that people have higher satisfaction when they trust the person that they're working with. Do you feel like they're competent? Do you feel like they're honest? Do you like them? Those things matter. So, to keep the cost down, something that a lot of patients enjoy is financing or leasing their devices. This spreads out the cost over a term instead of paying for the devices and the care all up front. If that can't be done, partner with a local practice who has relationships with senior centers, community centers, nonprofits, who help people get grants in the community. There's a lot of grants out there to help people with their hearing aids, their glasses, their wheelchairs. But if those options still don't work for you, and at the end of the day, you just want the cost to be lower, something in this treatment plan has to give. And the most common cost that is cut to reduce the cost is the services. Many insurance companies are now offering what they call benefits, where they don't actually contribute money towards the hearing devices themselves, but reduce the initial price by taking the services out of it. So you're just buying the technology, which does reduce the initial cost, but then over a period of time, you're paying every time you come in to see your provider. So this is a positive in that it can reduce that initial cost, but some negatives are it also sometimes reduces the warranty. It always reduces the trial period, how long you have to return them. And it can reduce your positive impression of your experience with that practice. Because when you have to start paying for services, nobody likes to pay for things, you just want things to work. Additionally, if you've been used to a practice that had services all included for a period of time, having to pay feels like a negative when it's different. So far we've discussed how the regular treatment plan works and how to make alternative paths to that treatment plan. But there are some outside ear gear influences that are also growing to complement this standard. To appreciate this addition to the hearing care industry, we must first understand the market needs that have favored its growth, understand how technology is evolving, and get to know help yourself tools as a whole. So, listener wants and demands are creating new options for people with hearing loss. And this is in part because everybody who has hearing loss is not being served by that current model we've been discussing. For people who have a severe to profound hearing loss, they likely have hearing devices and they likely have a relationship with a provider. But for people with mild to moderate hearing loss, they're less likely to be seeking treatment. Given what we know about the effects of untreated hearing loss, this can't be accepted. Everybody who has hearing loss should feel compelled or feel like it's easy to get the help that they need. This is also important because when you think about people with hearing loss as a whole, those with mild to moderate hearing loss make up the majority of those people with hearing loss. So we're missing a big demographic right now. So how is technology evolving to help this? Well, hearing devices are continually evolving, and we know what those are for. Those are for helping people hear better. And they have been advanced over hundreds of years of research and user input. We talked a little bit about audio buds that are littering people's ears everywhere right now. These were designed for phone call and media streaming use. And one benefit of these is that they're easy to buy and that they have normalized wearing gear in your ears. Somewhere between those two categories are over-the-counter hearing devices. And over-the-counter hearing devices, similar to Bluetooth gadgets, can be purchased over-the-counter without the help of a professional, but are meant to help with situational hearing improvement. Many people are very excited about the idea of over-the-counter hearing devices. So let's unpack what they are. Over-the-counter hearing devices are gadgets that you can buy over-the-counter without the help of a professional for adults who perceive that they have mild to moderate hearing loss. So you don't have to have a hearing test. There's no involvement of a professional. And this means that the consumer themselves is making sure the devices fit in their ears right, making sure the sound quality is right. And that's a guesstimation at best in those circumstances. However, it does provide a lower entry cost because you're not paying for any professional involvement. And these are designed for those users we identified as not being served by the current model. For those people who would never come into a practice like mine, for people like my husband who would rather do it themselves until it breaks and then go see a professional, and for people who just want an easy access thing. I'm not hearing well, I want to go just buy something at Walmart and hear a little bit better until I can get in to see a doctor about my loss. You may have seen news lines regarding over-the-counter hearing devices the last few years, and this is all about regulating them. So in 2017, the Over-the-Counter Hearing Aid Act was passed with the goal in mind to reduce costs, increase access, and increase competition in the hearing care space. In 2020, we were supposed to have the first draft of what those rules would look like in terms of regulation, and the pandemic got in the way, just like many things. But actually, in the last few weeks, we have the first rules, proposed rules, regarding how over-the-counter hearing devices are going to be regulated. So now is the time in the next 90 days for providers like me, manufacturers, personal sound amplifier makers, or you to share your voice in terms of shaping what those rules will look like. The thing I want to stress here is that even though over-the-counter hearing regulation is new, over-the-counter hearing devices are not. They have existed in a direct-to-consumer marketplace for a lot of years. Often called personal sound amplification products, or hearables. The thing that's changing is that the FDA is going to regulate some of these gadgets right now. So now we're gonna have some unregulated audio help and some regulated audio help. And the sole purpose is to protect the consumer and provide a standard of care for what you should be getting when you buy a device off the shelf. So over-the-counter devices have some benefits and have some limitations. Benefits include, I wrote this wrong, I realized this last night, but I already sent my slides, increased less barriers, but they're going to reduce barriers for hearing help for people who feel like cost is a barrier, or a professional is a barrier, or drive time is a barrier. They have the potential to reach those people who are not being served by the current model. They're going to lead to innovation because the more people that are wearing gear in the ears, the more user input we have, which means all hearing technology is going to improve. And it's going to be the demise of substandard hearing care providers. The limitations include they could pose a risk for the inaccurate treatment of hearing loss because you're literally self-identifying your loss and self-selecting your product to fit that loss. The loss might be underfit or overfit. And this may then provide a bad initial experience with ear gear, which might stop some people from coming into a practice like mine to get help. And many consumers are very hopeful that this means that classic hearing devices associated with professional care are going to get cheaper because of the introduction of these items. That's not true. These are another menu option designed to be fully used without a professional, and they're designed to complement that standard of hearing care that has been proven to help so many people. So, like I said, the over-the-counter hearing devices are alive and well, but they've been called personal sound amplification products right now, and they haven't been regulated. And for those users who are engaging with the hearing care model right now, hearing devices are still preferred. Reasons for this, according to Market Track 10, are that listeners don't feel confident self-identifying their hearing loss. Listeners don't feel confident self-selecting their own products. And even more listeners don't feel confident troubleshooting their products when they become problematic, maybe when one dies or one loses connection to a cell phone. So hearing aid owners almost unanimously agree that the hearing care professional they worked with played a substantial role in their journey with satisfaction rates at 94%. That's from that same Market Track study that was done last year. So a provider is irreplaceable, no matter the gadget you're purchasing. If you're getting an over-the-counter hearing device, go to a community center or a senior center, get a free hearing screening, get advice about what product might be the right one for you. Same thing if you're going down that classic path. Providers provide advice on what the right style is for you, what the right fit is for you, how to reduce annoying things like feedback, and how to customize the device to meet your needs. You know, if a mask is bugging you, what are ways that we can help improve that situation? So how do you make the right choice for yourself? Trust your gut. More choices in the marketplace definitely don't make it easier to make the decision, but as I've been saying, listeners today are smart. Smart listeners understand that any money spent in the absence of value is wasted. So don't be afraid to put your trial period in your calendar and return any product that you're not happy with. Smart listeners are the captain of their own journey. They take a front seat approach to their hearing care. Smart listeners understand that having a guide is what is going to yield their personal best results. Even research from telehealth scheduler ZocDoc has found that people overwhelmingly choose doctors within their proximity, even for telehealth appointments. And like I said earlier, smart listeners understand that prioritizing their hearing health prioritizes their overall health and their connections to the people that matter most to them. Hearing care is changing because of listeners like you. The audio world is in its renaissance, with the user having more input and control than ever before. This is going to open more doors for hearing technology in the future, all hearing technologies, because as they say, a rising tide lifts all boats. That said, some traditions never die, like phoning a friend when you need help. So when you want to hear with confidence, don't be afraid to phone a provider in your community and know that family hearing is that friend. There are some resources I discussed, like online hearing tests, shopping tools that go over the investment, the trial period, the warranty, and how to provide your insights into what you want those over-the-counter hearing aid rules to look like. If you go to our website, familyhearingco.com, there's a yellow button at the top of the page that says Aging at Altitude with links to all of those things if you want to do more research on your own. Thank you so much.
Questions?
The question was, do they make hearing aids that go over your ears?
Thank you so much.
Like a headset, you mean? I'm sure that there are personal sound amplification products that fit like headphones that might make that easier, but typically in those instances, somebody with no arms is going to have a caregiver in their life or somebody that can help put those things in the morning and take them out. That would be typically how that is approached. I think you had a question? So I can't recommend a safe way to clean your ears to a large group without looking in your ears, because you could have a hole in your eardrum, you could have some type of allergy in your ear canal. So I would say visit a professional to take a peek in there, and then they can give you some advice. But Q-tips feel good. They don't actually remove wax. That is one thing I will say.
Do hearing aid professionals, companies, have like special relationships with particular products, like is a particular brand, and so they would be recommending a specific brand to the patient that is coming in or the customer who's coming in?
I'm just going to repeat that question for everyone. She asked, do hearing aid companies have relationships with a particular brand so that what you're getting recommended when you see a provider is with a certain brand primarily? Yes. Some practices do have relationships with certain brands that will influence them making recommendations based on that product. A good hearing practice will also not let that be the only thing that they recommend, because not every brand is right for every person. Some are better for power losses, some are better for mild hearing losses, and really what your goals are. So yes, that's true, but a good practice shouldn't just be recommending one brand, because they all have value. Great question.
What do you figure the average cost of hearing aids are, for one thing? And then the other is, I have a problem, my head gets stuffed up for some reason, and I can't hear, I can't talk at a point.
Okay, so how much do hearing aids cost? That all depends on if you're getting services included with your hearing devices or not. So typically, traditionally, you're going to pay about $2,000 to $7,500 for hearing devices that come with professional care. When you get hearing devices that don't have professional care tied in and you're paying as you go, that initial cost might be $1,000 less. Somewhere in that range, but it's a big marketplace. As far as pressure in your head, there are tests we can do to kind of see what's going on there. So I can't really answer that question that well right now without seeing you in person. So come see us.
Folks, thank you so much for coming today. Aging at Altitude, again, will return in April with a whole new slate of informative presentations. So thank you so much again. Have a wonderful afternoon, and we'll see you in April.